Hi everyone, welcome to A Life of Education. Today we have Joe Maynard from the Osteopathic Health Centre talking to us today about Gait, barefoot science and anything else.
Yeah, hello, thanks for having me.
No worries.
Do you want to just introduce yourself and just say what your background is and how you ended up in Dubai?
Yeah, so me as a person, being extremely sporty all my life, from as young as I can remember. Everything from swimming to basketball, and I've ended up predominantly on running. And then I decided, what do I do as a job? How can I push myself to get to the next stage, and what can help me in my future? So I actually started off with my dad getting injured all the time running himself, and he said, why don't you become a physio so you can treat me? And then I ended up being a physio. Worked in the NHS in the UK for 9 years, then moved to Dubai 2.5 years ago.
And that's funny enough, we're way man.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Luckily, I met Caroline then in my physiotherapy clinic. And basically, and then I amalgamated both those two things together, my love as a hobby and then my love as work.
How did you guys meet?
Do you want to say that on me?
Yeah, so obviously we've discussed my accident, everything that happened, and I've talked about it a little bit, but initially when I got out of hospital, I started, and once all my wounds healed, I started seeing you for hydrotherapy and some physio sessions, and you and I used to chat a lot in the pool. You would show me how to move
dragging
again.
you around the pool.
Yeah, it was fun. We had some good chats. So I think on a personal basis, obviously, we got along really well, and it was just hydrotherapy is quite an amazing thing, particularly when you're wheelchair mounted.
Hydrotherapy is brilliant. I had a client yesterday literally who had quite a complex fracture of his knee, and he's been back walking on his crutches for 1 day. And I said to him, have you got a swimming pool at home? We're in Dubai, a lot of people have swimming pools at home.
Yeah.
So I literally said, I want you in the pool an hour a day. And he was hopefully he's in the pool today for an hour, and I know straight away it's going to help him. So yeah, hydrotherapy is amazing because it just takes off 50% of your weight if the water's up to your belly button. So yeah, it's brilliant.
I think as well, just to digress on the topic, for someone who doesn't have a lot of stimulation when you're in a wheelchair, to be able to move freely in the water, it feels so lovely. I got obsessed with it.
Addictive. It's
Yeah.
worse things to be addicted to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, we used to do a bit with the military, but it was a bit more late stage rehab than what you guys were doing. We just used to get people in the pool to try and keep their fitness levels up who had some sort of trauma, well, injury generally, but nothing so complex that they had to be lifted in or kind of. I imagine you guys did a lot of slow moving. You were holding.
Oh, so Joe used to put me into a floaty and just walk around the pool, and I used to just lay there like a starfish.
Just to get hip muscles to engage against the resistance of the water, low level, because obviously gravity's not really elicited at all, so it's the easiest way to switch on the muscles.
We used to do a bit more higher intensity stuff with the guys.
Of course.
To try and get them. We did it in university. I did the low level stuff in university, but from there I've never had experience doing it.
Anyway, so let's diverge. So we wanted to obviously bring you on today to discuss your gait analysis course that is going to be featured on A Life of Education really soon.
Yep.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about the course and what people are going to learn on it?
Yeah, of course. It's a 4-part course, talking everything and anything about gait, basically. Everything from the anatomy with the joints and the muscles that are included in the gait cycle, to the phases of the gait and how to assess that gait, biomechanics, even talk quite a bit on one of the presentations is on the foot itself and how integral that is into the gait cycle, whether it be running or walking. The most important thing, obviously, your foot is the only thing that comes into contact with the ground in the gait cycle, so I do spend quite a bit of time on that, and I do advocate the foot in everything we should do in life, so that's probably what we're going to progress and talk on to about today.
Yeah, so the first one is just a general introduction, isn't it? A general introduction to the gait cycle and the different stages of gait. You spoke a lot about the difference between the two sets of terminology.
Yes, so when you look at in the first presentation, it is literally introduction to the gait and gait analysis. So there's two different ways that people talk about gait. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the most important difference, for example, is the ground contact, the initial contact, or first point of contact, or heel strike. So when you talk to people, say you talk to your physiotherapist, your personal trainer, your podiatrist, you might hear the words being thrown about on heel strike or at forefoot strike, which is very specific. But I tend to use a different technique or different technique of analysis where I talk about initial contact, because everybody's initial contact is different. So if you were writing your notes and you said, this patient had a forefoot heel strike, which if you were using that terminology, it doesn't make sense. So you say this patient or this client's initial contact is with a varus heel strike, for example, so an outward turned heel strike, then that would make a lot more comfortable and a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So that's how we tend to do it.
And even that sounds a little confusing right now, but that's what the talk explains. Yeah, the difference between the two, kind of the old school words and then the more specific terminology. No, I really enjoy it. We were listening in when it was on, and it's some stuff how you don't really come across in the general population world. But it's so important when you have somebody who you're trying to help lose weight, and you spend 5 minutes talking to them while they walk on a treadmill, and hips are moving, they're going, the stride's not very long, they're pounding into the surface of the thing, making a lot of noise. Your instinct is telling you that there's something wrong, but there's not much you can do about it standing on a gym floor.
Most people look at somebody walking on a treadmill, or whether you're a personal trainer or a physiotherapist, and a patient has come to you with an injury, or with a problem, or with want to lose weight, but they can't lose weight because they have this niggle, or they can't run on a treadmill full stop because the mechanics are totally different than running on the road. Lots of different variances. But when you do then look at this gait, you can, like he said, you can tell something is wrong. You know there's something just off there, but you can't put it into words and you can't put it onto paper. So hopefully with the talk we're going to go through, you'll be able to break down each of the cycles, each of the phases, and then see where they're differentiating or differing from normal. When I say normal in inverted commas, because everybody has their own gait cycle. It's just as integral to them as a fingerprint or a voice recognition or your pupil or your retina. Literally their gait cycle is different to everybody.
Yeah, it's funny, if you look at somebody, a silhouette of your friend walking, or a group of your friends, you'll actually be able to tell which friend it is, which is a funny thing that we've done in the past. I've been involved in, where you just in the darkness, or you just tell someone to walk, and then you know by the shape of their walk, obviously their posture, their height, but their little mannerisms, they bounce up and down, they sway side to side, long stride, short stride. Like I said, everyone has got a very signature walk.
So maybe for people who are not so familiar with gait, what do you think are the take-home elements about learning about gait and understanding, and what can people take to their clients? How can they improve their health?
So, I think I've quoted some quotes in the past that the human body does best what it does the most. So if you're seeing a client who has a non-structural leg length discrepancy, so the legs are the wrong length because of pelvic shift or something like that, you need to look at them walking. And the main take home is don't try and assess someone running before you assess them walking, because everything moves a little bit too quick when you're running. If you can't see how they're walking, then when it comes to running, you're not going to be able to really focus on everything. And when people do look at their gait analysis, they tend to look at the whole thing. And you don't really want to do that. You want to break it down, look at just the right foot, then the right knee and foot, then the right knee, foot and hip, and then the right knee, foot, hip and low back. Then you do it all on the left side. And then you add in the arm swing, and then you add in the torso rotation at the top. But if you break it down, it's very simple. So on the talk, I talk to you how to break it down, but it's not it's a guideline. It's not you need to do this. It's okay, I'm going to use this, what Joe taught me, but then I want to add in maybe this, and I want to look at that, and it's making sure you really look at all the elements and trying to replicate what they do. If they say I get pain when I walk uphill, don't assess them walking on the flat. You need to put that on an incline. You need to see whether they're leaning forwards from their core and things like that. So it's trying to make it specific to the client when you do their gait analysis, because they'll literally tell you what's wrong with them without you having to really tell them.
And essentially the reason to understand and analyse gait would be to get people out of pain and potentially to improve their performance.
Yeah, 100%. It's better to prevent an injury than to manage one. Most people come to a physiotherapist or a rehab specialist and say, I keep on pulling my hamstring, I keep on getting Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy, I want to stop it. So I can, in theory, fix the symptoms, but their problem might be derived from the mechanics of their running technique or their gait. So there's no point in me assessing their gait when they're in pain, because they're going to have a different gait. So they should come to me afterwards.
It's like when people run and they get shin splints all the time.
Exactly.
So you want to correct how they run so that they don't get shin splints.
And not just keep on treating the shin splints every 6 months. You see the same clients coming in and out. And I say to them, I want to see when you're not in pain and when you're better, but who goes to a physiotherapist when you're not in pain? It doesn't compute. But pain isn't the only symptom you need to be aware of. It's function, it's strength, it's performance, it's everything, not just pain.
Yeah, because you've got the pain aspect, but also from an efficiency perspective, like if you have a sedentary client who's coming back from sitting at a desk for so long, and the only kind of walking they do is maybe in and out of the car and maybe around the shops, if you can improve their gait cycle, you can make them much more, you can improve their performance, but just simply walking around. And then that in the longer term will keep their back and keep their joints in a healthy position. So when they come to you for the gym, everything's soft and fluid and moving gently. It's not that they've just, they're all stiff and bunged up because they can't walk around, so they can't even walk in to the gym.
Yeah, I think this is my understanding of it, I think when it's clients that have normal day jobs, it's about reducing their pain. And then when it's elite athletes, it's like nanoseconds.
It's the 1%.
Yeah, that gets you from second to first.
Yeah.
Things like that. So it makes it a massive difference when it comes to competitive sports.
And like Keith was saying, you sit all day, and Dubai is a place where it's very sedentary. No one uses stairs, no one really walks anywhere, you can't really commute to work, you sit behind it, you wake up, you sit down, you have your breakfast, then you sit in the car, you sit at work, then you sit in the car and you sit having dinner, then you go to bed. So you're not really using your body as it's designed for, which is extension and upright movement and running and movement and just fluidity. So like I said, our job basically is to install the human's basically DNA, which is functional movement.
Yeah. So then, when the talk goes through the introduction, talks about the stages of gait and kind of what explains the terminology. The first part is the walking, and then the second part is the running. What are the kind of somebody who wants to start running? Because the way people get told, running is the easiest form of exercise. Just get outside and go for it. You don't need a lot of equipment, etc., etc. What kind of what's the more common issues that you find with people who just want to get running again?
When you look at running, it should be as easy as breathing. We're designed to run. We're bipedal, where our ancestry is that we are endurance hunters. So I think I was reading an article recently that a long time before we even had spears, before we had guns, before we had bow and arrows, we literally used to just hunt prey by just keep running after them until the prey, obviously they overheat, humans don't overheat, they get heat stroke and pass away, and then we've got our prey. That's how we used to hunt. So that's how, I'm sure you might have read that Born to Run book with Tara Mara in talking about ancestry and hunting. They literally hunt their prey for 200 miles, then they find it curled up underneath the bush, and then that's their dinner for their family for the week. So we are literally designed to run. But, going back to what I said before, we sit behind desks now. We're not designed to do anything. Like I said also before, our body does best what we do the most, which is sitting behind desks, flex postures, which isn't normal. So when it comes to the running form, someone wakes up 1st of January, I'll tell you what, let's go and try and lose some weight, let's go running, let's do something. They put a brand new pair of trainers on with rigid support because they were sold them in the shop. They're the most expensive, why not? They put them on and they go for their run. Then they come to me after a week with anterior knee pain, Achilles pain, they get plantar fasciitis, like I said, shin splints, low back pain predominantly. Get a lot of people with low back pain. The list goes on and on and on. And then they come to me with the pain, they leave, they start running again, they come back to me with the pain, rather than just saying, just someone show me how do I run. And there's a really good analogy that some singers can just sing, they've got a beautiful voice. Some people need singing lessons and they still have an equally beautiful voice. It's the same with running. Some people can just run and have amazing technique. Some people need to be taught how to run, and they're equally as good, and they can still win Olympic gold medals. And it just depends.
So essentially, after you would do, say, a gait analysis, you would do corrective exercises to assist people. That would be the bridging the gap.
Yeah,
Okay.
the prehab word, which is so big out there in the world at the moment. Preventative medicine is all the way forwards, and everything from heart disease right down to having a stiff big toe. Preventative medicine is the way, because in the long run it's going to save you, the company, insurance companies, the hospitals, time and money, and that's where the world should be going.
So what are some of the corrective exercises for some of the conditions?
Ooh, good
Just
question.
like a little taster.
So when you look at, I'll try to break it down, because I think on one of the talks, actually it was the second talk I spoke about, one of the things I spoke about in the running technique were the 5 ways the body absorbs shock. So when you break that down, you look at the foot and ankle complex, the knee complex and the pelvis, and there's a few areas between all of them. If a patient comes to you and they have a reduction in dorsiflexion, which means reduction of the foot coming up towards the shin, then in theory you're going to have to put more strain through the posterior part of the leg, through the Achilles, through the plantar fascia. Something as simple as just stretching the calf muscles, the 2 main components in the calf muscles, foam rolling and self-soft tissue release. Those can be the simplest ways to reduce foot and ankle problems. And most, I would say, I think it's up to about 90% of foot and ankle injuries are derived from the calf muscle and or poor mechanics of the calf. So that's an easy way and a quick fix people should try. Just get everything loose. Then if it's still sore, then see a professional, I would say.
Nice. And what about for shin splints? Because obviously that's a really common one as well.
So the shin splints, the layman term of shin splints is the early stage of stress, or medial tibial stress syndrome is what I would call it. And it's predominantly a biomechanical problem due to either a tight calf or an increase in pronation of the foot, and a sustained pronation of the foot, which means the foot collapses in towards a flat foot posture. So we need to correct the arch, we need to increase arch integrity, and we need to try and increase the strength of the intrinsic muscles in the foot, so then the pain and the pressure doesn't then hit you in the shin when you run. Then we also come on to the factor of, is it the point that I'm just slamming my foot into the floor over and over again, and you get something called ground reaction force, where it's the force that the ground is putting back up into the foot when you put your foot on the floor. When you land on the front of your foot, or the forefoot, it is dispersed between a larger surface area, so you have less ground force, so the shock is attenuated and is settled down, so it doesn't hit you in the shin, the knee and the hip. But if you land with a very drastic heel strike, the heel is smaller than the forefoot, and you're landing with a straight leg more often than not, the force has got to go somewhere, and unfortunately it'll hit you anywhere up the chain, starting more at the heel, then it'll hit you in the shin. So making sure that you have a nice integral arch, so lots of barefoot exercises, walking exercises on grass, on sand, just to strengthen the muscles in the foot, pretty good. And along with increasing the height of the arch through strengthening a muscle called the tibialis posterior, which helps to create a sling for that medial arch. So anything along those lines will help in changing biomechanics at a low level. But when you're running, it becomes a lot harder, because your foot's on the floor for milliseconds. You haven't got time to think, I need to increase my arch height. It should come naturally.
So there's a question that I wanted to discuss. I'm so eager to talk about this, because I hear so much conversation about this, and it's barefoot running versus wearing really supported shoes.
Yes.
So maybe you can explain to us, why is that conversation there, and what's better suited for people?
I'm sure, I don't know if Keith wants to jump in here. Obviously, do you have clients coming to you asking you about barefoot and forefoot and running technique?
We talk about it, but they don't. I don't have people who come to me looking for advice, looking for like, should they do it? The question tends to pop up when you see people in the gym, either in their bare feet gymming or wearing those 5-finger toes.
Vibrams.
Yeah. And the conversation just flows. It's not so much they don't ask me for advice. And I've sent a couple of people to you for a pure fluid gait assessment in the past.
So the theory of barefoot running versus shod running or shoe foot running is huge at the moment, and pretty much ever since McDougall brought out the book Born to Run, no one really heard about it. People thought, you see the Kenyans in the London Marathon 20 years ago, people used to run barefoot. You think, he's a crazy guy, he's going to stand on some nails and on some glass. But they obviously do it for a reason, and he wins the races for a reason. Footwear these days, like I said, not to name names of footwear, but some have extreme amount of support in the foot.
Yeah, I've noticed as well the heels can be really chunky, like
Yeah.
huge.
There's one shoe, like I said, I'm not going to name names, but it looks like you run on a cloud. And another shoe, which is probably one of the most famous brands in the world.
I think you can name them. I mean, Nike Air Max have a massive shoe. I don't know how many people run in them.
Yeah, so basically Nike have just brought out this shoe that they publicise it by, I don't know if you've seen the videos.
I think I own it, so.
Oh dear, there we
You
go.
own that shoe?
I think I do, because it does feel like I'm running on a cloud, but I have.
Well, you got a slightly different situation.
Yeah.
So you look at the actual shoe itself, and they publicise it by putting a shoe on a sponge, then on a spring, then on a trampoline, then on a cloud, and say, look how supportive and soft this shoe is when you run. That's awful, because the science behind it, which we'll go into a little bit, your foot has 26 bones, 33 joints. It's the most plastic thing in the human body. It's designed to move and mould to the surroundings. You put it in this really big, clumsy, ugly shoe. It might look pretty, fashion for function, but your whole body, it's limiting what the foot is meant to do, which is absorb shock. So then you put somebody in a really big heeled shoe, the brain's signals go, I've got a big comfy heel on this shoe, I can now slam my heel into the floor when I run. It's just a safety mechanism. As soon as you take a shoe off somebody and said run, you physically can't run with a heel strike because it's painful. So it naturally puts you onto your toes or midfoot, and in doing so then engages the 5 mechanisms of shock control. And when you absorb shock, you don't.
Can you just go over them? What are the 5?
The 5, of course, I've got them in my head here. So when you look at the foot, so we'll start with the foot itself. When your foot naturally hits the floor with a forefoot strike, you absorb shock. Then you get pronation, which absorbs a little bit more shock. So at this point here, you've stored all of your energy now is in your Achilles tendon and your calf. That energy then can be used then to push you forwards rather than just slamming your heel into the floor, and all the energy goes straight into the floor with sound, with noise, with heat. Like I said, energy can't be destroyed, it can just be transferred, which is, I think, one of Newton's laws. And then the second one then is an absorbent knee. If you land on the floor with a straight knee, shock is attenuated right up through the chain. But if you have an absorbent knee, it can act as a spring as well. So now if you add in those first 3, foot dorsiflexion, so the ankle's absorbing shock, then you've got pronation, then you've got the knee bending, it's like coiling a spring up. Then you add in the pelvis movements, which is through anterior tilt of the pelvis and through lateral tilt of the opposite side. So now you've coiled in this whole leg. As you then come to toe off, you can release all that energy, so it's stored energy. It just mechanically makes a lot more sense than just slamming you into the floor, and you have to create more movement by then using more muscles to then push you. You've lost all that energy. But like I said, going back to the shoes, sorry Caroline, if you're a forefoot runner or a midfoot strike runner, you land on your forefoot. How many shoes that you wear, expensive shoes from all these big brands, actually have support in the forefoot? All the support's in the heel.
Yeah, I don't know any.
Exactly. Everything, like if you look at the front of the shoe, there's nothing there.
And it's also what's interesting, because now I've started to follow a lot of these foot Instagram accounts that are talking about rehab of the foot. All of the shoes are really narrow at the front, and they don't allow your toes to have space and movement.
Yeah, so in theory then, if you look at it, a marathon runner could run a London Marathon in a pair of Converse, for example, because if he's a forefoot striker, he doesn't need any support in the midfoot or the arch, which is what all these really expensive $200 shoes actually provide, because they're relying on people who run on their heels, which is naturally unviable. You look at all the gold medal winners across anything from 100 metres up to marathon, no one runs on their heels. They do that for a reason, the best in the world for a reason. And unfortunately, you can rely on these shoes.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, so I'm sold on the
Yeah,
minimalist.
but yours is slightly different.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are some abnormalities.
Because this is a good thing to talk about, because the key is that you have a mobile foot that can absorb the shock in the first instance before you get to the dorsiflexion and the knee rather than the hip.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas your foot is, because of the surgeries and stuff, you're still a little bit
Shattered.
stiff. Yeah. So for someone like you, in order for you to go in the evening time and go and get an enjoyment out of the run, you do need to go to Nike, call them up and get that heel, the one with the heel strap, so that you can physically go and run.
Yeah, so I'll tell you guys maybe why I like semi, so I try both. So I try in my house to walk around with no shoes on, and then when I leave or when I try and run, try is the operative word there, then I wear really supportive shoes, and it's just because my feet hurt so much. Even after like 3 or 4 Ks, like I just can't walk and I can't even stand on them. I have to lay down and it just hurts so much. So I found, just from personal experience, that the more supportive the shoe is, the less my foot hurts. But that's obviously diminishing. It's not as bad as it used to be. But same thing, if I go, like recently I went back to Sydney and I was walking all around Sydney and my feet were hurting so much, and then I put like really supportive shoes on and they were fine. So I definitely understand that my case is a little bit different.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people like that. There's a lot of people who have forefoot strike will hurt, you know, because they're the sedentary people who just go out and run. So it's sort of this is where the conversation gets interesting, because for the most efficient way to go out and hunt for 200 miles might be the the 4-foot adapt to your surface, but then there is sedentary people, so that's the reality that we're in. What do we do?
Well, I don't really classify myself as sedentary.
No.
But injured. So maybe you can impart some knowledge on that. So for people who, so on my feet, I've had like 2 surgeries on one, I've had 5 on the other. They've been reconstructed loads of times. Obviously, I shattered them. So maybe for people with, say, my type of condition or something similar, what would you recommend for them?
So obviously, talking about yourself, obviously you had these calcaneal fractures, complex calcaneal fractures, which had to be basically put back together, put back in pieces, and that comes onto the fact, in your case, your problem was you had this fracture, you had surgery, but your byproduct is the fact then that your gait's changed, you're weaker through all the muscles because you've not used the feet correctly. Basically, there's lots of elements. So it's a progression.
I think as well, this is what I found, is that my feet are structurally a different shape, and that's changed everything else.
Yeah.
Just because the shape of my bones are not the same, and so it's a cascade of oh wow, this is very, and the right and left side are different shapes to each other as well, so that makes it even.
So, like I said to you before, because you've got so many bones in the foot and so many joints, the foot has an amazing capacity to compensate. And what you've done is you've just gone through the biggest compensation ever. You've changed your foot, you've changed the rest of your body. I've got clients who undergo drastic midfoot corrections, people who have big bunions on their big toes, all of these people who have these degenerative changes. They have surgery on their feet, and the surgeon will rightly sit in front of them and say, you're going to hate me for a year to 18 months because I'm changing a massive part of your body. Aesthetically, the bunion's gone, the toe can move, but you've been relying on having that bunion to keep you stood upright for the last 30 years. So I see these clients, and clients come to me and say, I want to get rid of this bunion, and I say, is it painful? No, it just looks ugly, my high heels and my Christian Louboutins. And I go, okay, that's your problem. But if they do this, you will be in a boot for 6 to 8 weeks, you will be having rehab for this. I can give you exercises to stop your bunion getting worse, because the main cause for bunion problems is either footwear or tightness through the gastroc or through the calf, because it changes the angles of pull on the big toe, which then causes the big toe to drift outwards and sometimes underneath the little toes.
Pronation as well?
Pronation as well. So it's that whole movement, and you end up getting what we call pinch callus, which is hard skin on the inside of your big toe, because you can see that's where you're pushing off. So you keep pushing off the inside of your big toe, the big toe's only going to go one way, and that's pointing off to the outside. So there's tons of different ways, and you brought up a really good fact earlier that people who wear these really narrow shoes, like Adidas for example, are known for being really narrow at the front. When you naturally put your forefoot on the floor with a 4-foot strike, your 5 metatarsal heads should spread and absorb shock. But when you're in a narrow shoe, you don't have that shock, so you don't have that spread, so the pressure's got to go somewhere, usually into the plantar fascia, or if not into the Achilles. So it's complex, and I speak to lots of orthopedic surgeons, and you have orthopedic surgeons who specialise in knees, you have orthopedic surgeons that specialise in shoulders. There's only real 3-4 joints in the knee that you can really think of. Like I said, 33 in the foot. So foot and ankle surgeons are very proud people that they treat the most complex part of the body.
Well, I remember one of my surgeons saying to me that they can replace everything. So he's like, oh, we can replace your hip, we can replace your knee, but your feet, we're not there yet. So it's obviously very, very complex.
Yeah, like the talocrural joint, or the joint where the main joint in the ankle that does the dorsiflexion and plantar flexion, can have anything up to 7 or 8 times your body weight going through 4 centimeters squared. It's so much pressure through the one area, but it's very, very, very uncommon to get arthritis at this joint because it's so mechanically sound. The only time you ever see someone with arthritis in their ankle is if they fractured their ankle in the past, or if they've had trauma to their foot. It's very rare that you just develop arthritis in your ankle, and that's because the foot is just so, in theory, perfect. It's the most human part of our body other than opposable thumbs, more than any other animal, and it's just something that is overlooked. There's not enough specialists out there that specialise in the foot and ankle, and that's why I'm trying to be one of those people, because...
So basically we need to look after our feet. So
100%.
how can we do that then?
Going to this barefoot running, people, like I said, they read the book, they read the articles, they're on Instagram, they're seeing that people are walking around with hobbit feet and in really cool foot positions. So they take their shoes off and they go, right, I'm going to go and run 10k on the road. And they come to me then with stress fractures in their big toes, they come to me with obviously blisters, glass in their foot. It's not as simple as I'm going to take my shoes off and start running. It's a phased return, it's a phased running technique you need to work on. It'll be taking your shoes off, go into the beach or on a grass field, run for 30 seconds, walk for 30 seconds. Do that 4 or 5 times, put your shoes back on. And it's a slow build up. What I usually tell people when you do this barefoot running or try to increase your running, you need to finish every session thinking I could have done more than thinking I should have done less. Because then you can only add to it. You can't take away when you've got your stress fracture and you're in a boot for 6 weeks. So that's the best thing, slow and steady, and just give your body time to adapt.
Okay, so if we're starting like at the very beginning, we might just go for a walk on the beach with no shoes on. That would be a start.
Yeah.
To like feel the sand underneath your feet, maybe like spread your toes. We were talking about this earlier before the podcast started. Toe separators.
Yep. Yeah. So some people are making a lot of money off a little bit of silicone. It's not the first time the human body makes money off silicone. But the most important thing is letting the foot do its work. So your toes should naturally separate and spread when you put your foot on the floor, but people's feet become very, very lazy. And that brings me on to the fact of using these big comfy shoes or insoles. Like, if you break your collarbone, you put your arm in a sling. The collarbone heals, but then the arm's weak. If you have a lazy foot, your sling or your support is a really big shoe or an insole. You take that insole or support away and you've got a really even weaker foot. So, like I said, walking on sand and walking on the worst bit of the sand, where all the shells are, where all the stones are, that's the best bit to walk on, not the really nice soft bit where the water's lapping up on your feet. You want to walk on the sharp bits of coral and all that, because that's the way your body moves around the problems on the floor.
If I do that, I will get the most sensitive, painful feelings through the soles of my feet. Like, any sort of surface for me that's not smooth or flat, it's as if I'm walking on daggers.
Yeah.
Like, it's pathetic. Like, if I'm walking out from the soft sand into the ocean, that little bit where the shells are just hanging out on the shore, like, if you look at me, it's as if I'm walking on hot ash.
It's because he's Irish.
If
you were Australian and our beaches are full of...
You wear thongs all the time, you're constantly wearing your sandals, right?
Yeah.
We're being British, we very rarely wear sandals and shoes. And if you think how story is, say someone leaves a little bit of a Lego or an upturned plug on the floor and you stand on it,
forget it, I'm dead, man.
Your day's gone, right? That's you done for the day. But if you kept on walking on those Lego and those little pieces that your foot will, as soon as it just molds around it, it molds around the problem. So I was at the beach actually yesterday with my little niece, she's 4 years old, and she was running around on stones, on pebbles, and just she didn't feel anything. My brother was chasing her on these stones and was hobbling around like an old man. He's only 28. So, but then I ran after and I could do it because I literally have never got shoes on my feet pretty much, and it becomes normal. There's so many nerve endings in the bottom feet. That's why people have ticklish feet. You look at somebody who barefoot runs or who walks around barefoot all day, they won't have ticklish feet. You find somebody who lives in shoes all day, they have baby soft skin on the bottom of their feet.
Yeah, that's me.
It's super, super ticklish. My feet are full of hard skin, which is very unattractive, but it does the job.
Functional, yeah.
It's functional,
Yeah.
exactly.
So what else could we do? Because here secretly I'm writing notes down at the top of my head, like I need to do this, I need to do that. So for other people who want to start focusing on working their feet and maybe getting a little bit stronger in their feet, what else could they do?
There's so much good stuff, and you said yourself on Instagram and YouTube, just typing in foot pages. There's one called the Foot Collective,
Yeah, I love
which we
the
did
Foot
mention,
Collective.
and big shout out to them. They're brilliant at what they do, but they're pitching it to people who want to get better. You need to be aware that you can't just start walking barefoot, like I said to you before. So YouTube, Instagram, just the internet is very good, or finding a specialist. The most specialist person in feet in medicine is a podiatrist, in theory, if you think of it as far as a degree. They've got a degree in the foot, literally. But I've got best friends who are podiatrists, and they hate me for it, but they are very medical. It's like going to a doctor if you've got cancers and illnesses, and they apply you with medications, or you see a homeopath. Obviously, the science is there, but there's the natural way. You see a podiatrist with a collapsed arch, a stiff big toe, a bunion. Here's the insole. You see a physiotherapist who specialises in mechanics. They'll say, well, let's just loosen that big toe. Let's give you the exercise to strengthen and increase your arch, so you don't need the insole. Like I said, I'm trained to mould insoles for the last 10 years. I've never made one because I don't need to, because we just train the foot, basically. So going back to your question, there's a lot you can do.
Yeah, I know I started, sorry to interrupt you, I started doing basically around my house, I walk on my tippy toes. So I walk around on my toes and then I walk back, and then every time I'm in an elevator alone, I don't do this in public, I try and do heel raises and then stand on my toes and then try and stand on one leg and then stand on the other.
So CCTV
Yeah.
footage will be rather
I
interesting.
know.
There's a really nice exercise that people can do just simply sitting at home on the couch regarding the toe separators without going out to spend a fortune. It's just to put your fingers between your toes. Just sit there, try and get your knuckles of your first knuckle of each finger between each toe all the way across your feet.
I think I showed you that.
Perhaps, yeah, that's how I did that. And it's not comfortable, but
No.
after a while, it feels nice on your feet because you feel like your toes are moving into positions that they don't really move into. And that's separated apart from each other. And then once you can get your fingers comfortably down, like where almost like the webbing is touching the webbing of your fingers is on the webbing of your toes, then start to bend and rotate the foot around all different directions, and you'll feel the structures all the way through the sole of your foot stretching out. I think that's a really nice one. And it doesn't take any effort to sit down, cross your leg, and put your fingers between your toes.
I've seen some where you get like marbles and you pick up the marbles with your toes and then put them into a jar, and you've got to do like
Yeah,
one
use that
marble at a time.
Mhm.
I think that's really cool too. Or you
Yeah.
get a towel and you scrunch
Also very
and then
good.
press away.
Yeah. So people always laugh at my toes because they're like fingers, and I'm going
But
to
that's
hide
how
them
they
now.
should be,
But
right?
exactly, you look at people who are born without hands; they can do everything with their toes. You have pretty much all the same muscles in your hands, other than the thumb and the big toe. They are different. But the toes, they can bend, they can straighten. You should be able to open and close, and you should be able to use the lumbricals and do a contraction, which is the muscles in the foot. You should be able to do that, but you don't, because you get these lazy feet. So, yeah.
So what do you wear when you run?
What make of shoe, or what sort of shoe? What
Yeah,
style?
both, yeah.
So at the moment I wear a low profile 4mm drop on my heel. So 4mm difference between the front of the foot and the heel. Just because finding a 0mm drop is very hard to find. So a 4mm drop is what I wear when I do my competitions. And I'm actually wearing New Balance at the moment. There are a lot of good brands out there. Brooks, New Balance, Saucony, they're all very good brands for running. But then you look at the brands that are good for fashion, Nike, Adidas, Puma, those sort of things. They're fashionable shoes, but their function isn't really there as far as the mechanisms of movement, which we've been speaking about.
And would you recommend people run in Vibrams?
Vibrams are brilliant. I recommend you can use them if your foot can use them, if that makes sense. I don't want you to go and buy a pair and think, right, let's go.
Yeah.
They're there if the only reason you wear them is if the terrain is dangerous or is hazardous. Like there might be glass on the floor, stuff that you can't adapt your foot to have hard enough skin to stop a razor blade digging in your foot, for example. So the only time I'd really get you to use them is if you're wearing in a hazardous scenario. The good thing in Dubai, all the running tracks are those lovely foam running tracks. They're good for training your foot, but they're not good for performance. Because going back to the ground reaction force, if you put 100% of force on that track, the track's going to absorb 10% of it because it's spongy. And then that sponge then is going to limit and take away some of the force coming back up into your foot and propel you forward. So I was watching the Ironman recently, and when you look at the running track down on Jumeirah Beach, you've got the sponge, you've got the wooden slate, and you've got about a foot wide section of brick. For basically the competition where people are running towards each other is who's going to stay on this brick. And it's the same when I go run on there. Everyone wants to be on the concrete.
Exactly that.
It's brilliant because it's the best way. And people don't know that running on the soft is worse for you, but it just feels better to run on something harder. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was training for the marathon here, and I used to run on that narrow brick. Yeah, it's like the rubber, then the boardwalk, wooden planks, and then there's the separation block all the way for 7 kilometers. And, yeah, I do remember overtaking people and coming back onto the middle, and then people coming towards you, they're doing the same, and you've got to go around them. Yeah, it just feels more efficient, and also because the marathon is ran on concrete.
Yeah.
I didn't want to run for 6 to 9 months on padded terrain and then have to go and suddenly pound concrete for 42k.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, for people then who, how can they tell themselves, like, if they need to have a higher arch, or if they need to get a whole full assessment, or if just an off the shelf will be enough for them?
Like I said, everybody's arch, everybody's foot, everything is different, and it's if you have repeated injuries in the lower part of your foot or in the lower part of your ankle, then you need to consider why, not just keep on treating it sore. So that's one thing you really need to be aware of. So that's the point where you go, I need to see somebody who's a specialist. You can't just walk into a shop and say, I want to get those 4mm drop, because Joe said on the Life Education podcast they're good. Some shops do gait assessments, but they do static gait assessment, which makes no sense to me. They get you to stand on a pad, they get you to stand off, and they go, oh, you have an arch, here's this shoe. Which is pointless, because when you walk, your foot changes. It's a mobile entity. And you stand on this heat pad and you go, oh yeah, you've got an arch. So what I usually tell people is, when you get out of the shower, when you're on the beach, walk, have a look back at your footprint. Is there an arch? Yeah, okay, so then you know that it's a little bit more dynamic. You should have 3 arches in the foot. Most people only really think of the one on the inside, but there's one on the outside, and then there's a transverse one through the middle. So it's having all 3 arches working efficiently to give you that strong foot, to allow you then to put the forces down to be able to run. It's not as simple as I've got an arch, I haven't got an arch, it's whether my arch is functional. And I think there's 5 ways, 5 parts of the foot that give you the arch. And there's 5 components in the foot. I don't know if you want to talk about the 5 little bits.
Yeah, go.
So I usually say that the arch is a bit like a bridge. So you have bridges which are just designed by just blocks that are all put on top of each other, which is the shape of the bones in our foot. They're all wedged. So then the force when you put the force on the top, it's fine. Then if you think of a suspension bridge, which have wires come down, those are the long tendons in your calf. They come down, they loop under the arch and keep the arch up. Then you look at just a normal bridge, which is just structurally sound, without any problems across the bottom. Those are just your ligaments within each of the bricks. Then you've got the plantar aponeurosis, so the structure at the bottom of the foot, which is a bit like putting a rope, tightening it, and it brings everything closer at the bottom. That's what gives you the other one. And then you have more muscles within the foot as well that give you the minute sections. So think of it as a bridge with a nice arch, plus a suspension, plus another suspension underneath, plus all the concrete in between each of the bricks, and it gives you a really rigid arch. If one of these things are not working, then everything's out of sync.
And then what about people who have something that's too rigid?
You can have something called hallux rigidus, which is stiffness in the big toe and in the middle of the foot. Sorry.
That's my right foot.
Yeah. And if you have hallux rigidus, it limits something called the windlass mechanism, which is probably one of the most important things within the human foot.
Oh.
Have you heard of the windlass?
No.
So the windlass mechanism is a process that when your big toe bends past 60 degrees of extension, so up towards the shin, it increases your arch height naturally by tightening the aponeurosis, so the stuff at the bottom of the foot, which in theory then turns your foot towards supination, which then starts the toe-off phase to propel you forward. So if you've got a stiff big toe, you can't engage the plantar aponeurosis, you can't then start to supinate the foot to bring yourself out of pronation to then push you forward. So something simple as just wiggling your big toe can increase your arch height.
Yeah, so there's a good test for that where you pull up the big toe, you see if
Yep.
you can adjust, see if the height of the arch changes.
Passive dorsiflexion or flexion, extension of the big toe. So stand on 2 feet, or even on 1 foot, somebody else lifts your big toe up, it should increase your arch as well as externally rotate the hip and externally rotate the knee. That's the proper sign that everything should rotate outwards.
Mine doesn't do any of that.
We'll
It
find out, I'm
doesn't
sure.
move at all. Shame.
What I want to talk about as well is something my friend was telling me yesterday, being in Dubai, sat by a swimming pool, looking at each other's feet. He looked at my feet and thought, those feet look like they could run. I looked at his feet, he used to play rugby for England, and they literally just look like pieces of meat at the end of his legs. And he said to me, why are your feet, why have you got that hard skin there, why have you got this, why have you got that? And I looked at him and said, why are your feet like 2 pieces of meat? Obviously he wasn't as slim as, his feet weren't as slim as mine, but they were just something at the end of his leg. And he was telling me that when he went to Fiji on holiday this year, he was talking to some of the Fijian players, and when they won the Olympics rugby sevens, he was actually talking to the coach that coached the Fiji rugby sevens team. And he said that the guy came up to him and said, why do all my Fijian rugby players keep on getting ankle injuries? They keep on twisting their ankles, they keep on twisting their ankles, I can't stop them twisting their ankles. But they were brought up not wearing footwear and climbing trees, basically. So then when they were given football boots, which have support, studs, just everything a foot shouldn't have, then they kept on having problems. And the way you walk up a tree, I've never really done one, but your feet are turned outwards. Yeah. So they like being in that position. They then put them in a boot, and then they run, and then they kept on going over on their ankle, and that comes back to the thing we were talking about. The foot does most what it does best what it does the most. And in this case, literally, I'm a good old discussion about that, as well as the fact that you're going to get a lot of fractures anyway in rugby because it's not a smooth sport. But yeah, it's interesting.
Contact sport.
Yeah. But then again, you see just as many people getting injured running in straight lines, even if they're just sprinters, and it's just because the amount of forces going through the body are just so high.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you, Joe. You're doing lots of other exciting things. Maybe you can tell us about them. One of them is your prehab series of videos that you do on YouTube.
Yeah, so I'm about to launch something called Prehab World, which is a platform for injury prevention, basically. And all it basically talks about is normalising and making the body as functional as possible for the tasks you're asking it to do. A lot of people get most of their injuries because they're just doing things their body can't cope with. So what you have to do, or you have to take a step back and say, right, we either reduce what we're asking your body to do, or we increase your body's capacity to be able to do these exercises. And more often than not, people go, okay, tell me how to make myself better. So in my clinic itself, I run an injury prevention screening to a lot of people. And back in the UK, I used to do it to some of the football teams and rugby teams. So pre-season, patients or clients would come to me and say, I keep pulling my hamstrings, I don't want to pull my hamstring this season because I always end up having 6 to 8 weeks out. So then I look at everything from their big toe up to their jaw and work out what isn't working, what is working, where you're weak, where your asymmetries are, where you need to strengthen, blah, 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 blah. It takes a good hour and a half. I'll do a gait analysis, I'll do everything from toe to neck. Then I'll send them away for 2 months with just 2 or 3 exercises to work on their worst bit. Then we get them back in and we do a repeat. And then the way that the football clubs used to understand it and come to me is it's easier for them to pay to see me 1 session than when they're injured, see me twice a week for 8 weeks. So financially it makes sense, and that's why I've instigated down at our clinic. But it's usually busy round about the August, September time, because it's the pre-football, rugby, hurling, lacrosse. That's when everyone starts to get fit again. But then when it comes to the actual YouTube channel and the Instagram, which we're going to hopefully try and produce, it'll be little snippets, bit of an exercise. If you keep on getting anterior knee pain, try these exercises. If your hips, you feel like your legs are the wrong size, try this glute stretch. If you keep on getting low back pain, try this.
Yeah, do you know, I think that's so valuable. One of the things that I really learned through this kind of whole journey of being really injured and then recovering is that you really need to be your own ambassador to a certain degree. That's the bad word, but in terms of I know that I'm empowered because I'm discovering my body and discovering what doesn't work with it and what needs more time and care and exercise, and then actually doing it. And that's the key. So it's nice for people to say, okay, well, how do I empower myself to be able to find out what's going on? Obviously seek some help, but then at the same time be able to go, okay, well, I can look for Joe's lecture and have a look at this and then do this.
At the end of the day, you are your own specialist in your body. You are your expert in yourself.
Yeah, that's a better way of
It's
phrasing
true,
that.
because I sit down and the main 3 questions I ask my clients is, what makes it worse, what makes it better, and what's the pattern of your pain, or what's the pattern of your problems? And people look at me and go, I don't know, that's why I'm here. And I go, well, you've lived with this pain for months. Simple thing is, do more of the things that make it feel better, do less of the things that make it feel worse, and try and avoid your patterns of pain, and you'll get better. But people just need someone sometimes to tell them. The best time is when a client comes to me and they say, my pain is here when I do this at this time of the day, and I think it's because of this. It makes my job easier then. I can just dive straight in and actually start fixing the problem, rather than have to spend the first hour just trying to pull everything out of them to try and work out what it is. And like you said yourself, you need to be aware of what your body is telling you. And they might be telling you because you're not sleeping well, because your skin's breaking out, because your hair isn't good quality, or tons of things. Or it could just be because you're in pain. Your body loves a homeostasis. It loves to be level with a little bit of a challenge. It doesn't like to digress, because then that's when your cells die and you pass away, unfortunately.
So tell me a little bit about what people can expect to see on this channel and some of the exercises that you're going to be putting on there.
Yeah, so what I'd expect to see is, I want it to be a two-way thing. So people will comment on the channel on Instagram saying, I keep on getting this problem, and then I'll make a little video on that problem and post it hopefully a week later. So it'll be a two-way channel, so it'll be interactive. People can email me stuff and direct message me to ask questions, and I'll be there to answer them and maybe give advice within reason. A lot of the stuff linking in with our life education here is the education side, and I'm not doing this to educate professionals, I'm doing it to educate people. I'm doing it so you can wake up and go, I want to get fit, I might not be able to afford to go to physio, to see a physio, but I've got a bit of pain. Like you said yourself, you looked on Instagram, you found this cool website, the Foot Collective, you saw these toe separators, you tried them and they were good. It was easy, and I want it to be that easy. Like, technology these days, you should be able to just click on something, type in, I have anterior knee pain, and I should be able to say, it could be because of this, try this, if it doesn't work, seek a professional. That's basically what it should be. But proof's in the pudding.
Yeah. I think particularly because people, and I say this very generally, it's not very accurate, but I think a lot of people think that the solution to their pain is to have surgery, and just from experience, surgery can actually take you back a long time. It can take you back 6 months, or I don't know if you agree with me.
Yeah, you never really want to dive in with a knife and cut up a body, because there's a lot more going on in the neural system, and surgery's never really the answer unless it's high stakes. If you've got time, if you can be patient with it, and you can go through a proper conventional rehab process of exercises, some soft tissue work, maybe some recorrective movement pattern stuff, it's always going to be better than diving in and chopping up.
Yeah, of course. Like I remember one instance with my foot. So I had all this metal work on my foot, and I remember it was causing me a lot of pain. So I asked the surgeons to remove it, and he basically told me that to get the metal out, they would need to strip all the muscles from the bone, then remove the metal work, and then I would have to start again. And I remember after the surgery, like my feet were like 10 months back. They couldn't walk, they couldn't lift, they couldn't do anything. I was like, why did I do this?
Yeah. I think working in the National Health Service in the UK, we are designed to chop waiting lists. That's what we are, and that's one reason why I left. I'm not being horrible to the NHS. If you've got a life-threatening condition, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
But if you twist your ankle, you've got to wait 6 weeks to see a physio, which you're better by then anyway. So that's one reason why I moved to Dubai, because I can work acutely. If a patient twists their ankle that morning, I can see them that day, and their prognosis is 100 times better. But when you look at, like you said yourself there, the surgery, in the UK, there's a protocol. The NICE guidelines stipulate first you have to see a GP. They'll give you painkillers. Painkillers don't work, they'll send you to physio. Physio doesn't work, they'll send you for investigations. Investigations don't work, probably physiotherapy again, because now we know what's wrong with the investigations. If the investigations don't work and the physio doesn't work, then you see a surgeon. Then they'll maybe inject, then you'll have physio, then you'll have surgery. Then you'll have more physio. In Dubai, unfortunately, it's sort of the opposite way around, literally. You'll have a twisted knee. The first thing you're going to do is see a doctor. The doctor goes, you need surgery. They'll have surgery, then they'll come to me, and then they'll start the process. There's not many things in the world that you need surgery for, as far as your body is concerned. Sorry, as far as your body, the human mechanical body is concerned. If it's digestion, heart, lungs, obviously that's a medical emergency. There's things called red flags, which, like say for example, you have that much compression on your spinal cord that it's limiting your nerve function to your bladder and your bowel and your legs, you need surgery that minute, within seconds. But if you get a little bit of sciatica and the disc is a little bit slipped, hate when people use that, or if the disc is protruding and touching a nerve, there's lots of stuff physiotherapists, osteopaths, rehab specialists can do to then help to move that disc away, or to guide the nerve away, or to glide the nerve, and then you don't need the surgery. But here, I've seen patients who are 14, 15 years old who have had fusions in their spine because they've had back pain. The young girls come in with scars all up their spine, and they said, the doctor said I need to have these rods in my spine. And I looked at their x-rays. I'm not a specialist, I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, but I say to them, did you have physiotherapy? They go, no, the doctor said it wouldn't work.
Yeah, it's a sad shame that it's happening that way, and I think I agree with you entirely in the sense that when you have a massive accident, all of these procedures are life saving, so they help you to stay alive. But when people have niggling back pain or just lifestyle conditions, it's not. I think we need to do something else before we jump into surgery, and this is why your prehab stuff is so great, because you can at least try and use some corrective exercises to learn about your own body and to fix things before you need surgery.
Yeah, one of the other main things within this prehab is, like I said to you before, it's sports specific. So I'm going to do blocks of cycling related injuries, running related injuries, swimming related injuries, contact sport related injuries, Pilates and yoga related injuries. Because I see a lot of people who do yoga, Pilates, weight bearing through the hands with wrist pain, shoulder pain, because the human body isn't designed to bear weight on our arms. They're designed to reach into trees and pick apples and throw spears. That's what they're for. So when you see people coming in, I've been working on my handstands, my this, that, the other, I get wrist pain, I get shoulder pain. We've got to change how their body can cope with these demands on their body, and it's right across the board. It's not as specific to one thing.
Yeah. So Joe, if people want to follow you on Instagram, how can they do that?
Well, with the Prehab World, it's a new account. It's due to be released hopefully middle of this year. I'm just trying to get my contact together, and it is just Prehab World, just all one word, obviously. And the same with YouTube channel, exact same Prehab World. It's in process, but keep your eye open, and it should hopefully be released middle of this year.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Thanks
Joe.
for having me. It's been brilliant.
So Joe's lecture is going to be available on lifeofeducation.com. Amazing. Thanks, guys.
Nice to see you guys.
Bye.